Replacing the TDV6 in one of these can be a really costly exercise. Is there a cheaper way to do it? I think there is, and I've got one in here. Let's have a look. Hi team, this is my Range Rover Sport project. I rebuilt the engine for this. It's a 3-litre diesel V6. The motor was running fine for about 5,000 Ks, and then I found I had an issue with it. When I looked into the issue, I ended up finding that there was a cracked crank. Even though I've fully rebuilt the engine, I've decided I'm not going to rebuild it. Now I was sort of in do I, don't I, part out the car and just get rid of it and move on. I priced up replacement engines for the vehicle from the wreckers. Most of the time here in Australia, the wreckers were wanting around about $7,000 to $8,000 for a TDV6 out of one of these that had done around about 200,000 Ks. I know from my past experience around 200,000 Ks, you're also looking at replacing turbos, oil seals, oil pump, etc. And I went, is this worth it or isn't it? Having had the diesel V6 and an XF Jaguar, I decided I would look and see what XF Jaguar V6s were going for. And even though they are pretty much the same engine, half the price, $3,000. So I thought I'm going to take the chance on it. I'm going to put in the XF V6 into this vehicle. And there's a few things that are different on them, but overall the engine is basically the same. This video is about what do you need to do, what do you need to change, what do you need to keep, what do you need to get rid of on the diesel V6 out of an XF versus the diesel V6 out of a Range Rover Sport. One little difference I found with the V6 out of the XF Jaguar was that they tended to be in better condition. And a couple of reasons why. Jaguar owners maybe tend to be a little more careful. Obviously this is a 4-wheel drive. It goes, people take them off road, take them to the beach, and also this is a freaking heavy vehicle. This is like close to 3 tons, whereas the Jaguar is nearly a ton lighter. So the engines have not had to work as hard. I found one that seems to run really nicely. The turbos aren't blowing any smoke, which is fairly unlikely for a Range Rover Sport of the same age. Let's have a look at the two engines side by side, even though the one from here is in pieces. But let's have a look at them side by side. Initial thoughts, and I'll put this video together just showing you what I did, and hopefully we can, at the end of the video, it's in the car and running. Here are the two engines side by side, and there's a few things that are very obvious from the very beginning. If you have a look here, the Jaguar has an electric fan, and it also has the power steering pump on the right hand side of the engine. Whereas when you come back to here, because this has a viscose fan, we have to bolt that on, and also the power steering pump on this one is on the other side. I've had a look at the air conditioning compressors, and they're both the same model of compressor. However, this one has a different setup, and the air conditioning compressor goes to the back, whereas this one has a setup where the air conditioning goes to the front. The other thing that you'll notice is the configuration of the pipes. These ones are all contained within the front, whereas on these they're configured differently. And if you have a look along the bottom, there's the turbo control valve sits along the front, but in this one it sits up inside the bodywork next to the radiator. So there's a few differences straight off the bat that we're going to pick up on. What I've done is, because I also changed the timing belt, both this one and the rear one, at the time I built this engine, it's only done 5,000 Ks, because I'm going to have to take the bulk of this off anyway, and I'm not even too sure whether I can use that cover. The idea is I'll change the timing belt at the same time. Our alternator sits down here. I checked up the part numbers. I'm not too sure that they're the same one, so I'm just going to utilize the one off the original Range Rover. And coming around the back, If we look around here, on this, the pipe runs along the back here. It comes up and around the top there. On this one here, it just runs straight from one side to the other. That's a little bit different. But the basic setup is the same. The flywheel looks the same. I've just got to check that out a little bit more thoroughly. And of course the engine mounts. You've got a big ass rubber mount there for the Jaguar one, whereas the ones on the Range Rover, they sit down there and then the rubber mount is on the chassis. So those things are a little bit different. The main difference between the two, and it's not on here, but I'll take you over here, that is the sump off the Range Rover, which is really, really deep. Whereas if you have a look at the sump, and I haven't even drained the oil out of this one yet, if you have a look at the sump, it's shallow. Where this connects onto the bottom of the engine is the same, I believe. I'm going to be in trouble if that's not correct, but I'm pretty confident with it. The turbo here looks pretty much the same. On the other side, the turbo pipe work is different. From my understanding, the turbos are the same, so it may just be an orientation of this housing. That's the difference between the two. My goal is not to disassemble any of this engine, as little as possible, but the one thing I will have to do is the entire wiring loom here, because you've got certain things in certain places and they're slightly different. The whole wiring loom from here is going to have to move over to here. This pipe goes down into the sump and it comes all the way up to the vacuum pump. It goes in behind the turbo. I have tried to push one of these down. I forgot to put it on a build I was doing. You can't get it in without taking that turbo off. As that comes up here into the side of the vacuum pump. And it ain't there. So I can't come up into that. I'm going to have to swap that whole vacuum pump over. There's my project for the next few days. So this is the first thing I've taken off it, and that is the turbocharger control valve. It's the thing that sort of balances up the turbos. It has an actuator on here, and it has another control valve up here, which is obviously, that's controlled by the ECU. This is controlled by vacuum. I had a look at the numbers on that one, and even though the body, this middle part of the body here, is pretty much the same on both of them, so I think that's probably interchangeable. However, the number on the control valve is different. From what I could find out, this one is for higher performance. I think if you were doing the swap and you wanted to keep everything standard, I think I'd still be using that one. On these, I couldn't find part numbers to confirm it, but they seem like they are very similar. The difference is you can have a different spring tension and different diaphragms in either one. That might be a spring tension to go off at, I don't know, 20 psi, and this might be designed to go off at 15. Unless I could dig a little bit deeper and find out that, I would just be keeping with that, but maybe you could use the valve and body components if you think this one's getting a bit worn. On the front, that's mounted with a big ass bracket down here, which runs horizontal along the front of the engine. The other one runs vertical on the Range Rover. That bracket's got to come off. This pipe's in a different location on the Range Rover. The next cab off the rank is the Alternator. This one's the one off mine, the Land Rover, and this one's the Jaguar. There's the part number off that if you want to check it up. From what I could find out on my searches, the Jaguar one is 130 amps, the Land Rover one's 150 amps. So the Land Rover one is got a little bit more grunt in it. You probably could use this one. The other thing that I noticed is the pulley on this one is 53.5 mil. The one on the Jaguar is 57. I think the main reason for that is it's rated as a more powerful engine. The ECU is tuned a little bit differently. Therefore, people are expected to rev it a little bit higher. It doesn't over-rev the alternator. This would give you more voltage at low revs than that one. But it looks like they could be interchangeable. Let's have a look at the plug on the back. That's the Range Rover one. And the plug on the back of that one, yep, pretty much the same. Yes, potentially interchangeable. Would you do it? I don't know. One other thing to note, the one out of the Jaguar is exactly the same out of the Ford territory. If you are doing a swap and you're in Australia, you can get this exact alternator from a Ford territory to put into your Jaguar. Here are our two power steering pumps side by side. I decided to pull the engine out without removing it, so it's still connected to the power steering. It was a pain in the ass to take it off. Even though they look fairly similar, like this is sort of mounted in similar positions, the mounting blocks here are completely different, and the size of the pulley is completely different. This one is probably a centimetre bigger in diameter. I wouldn't be trying to interchange those at all. I don't think that's worth it in the least. So now that I've got the alternator and power steering pump out, we can see there are a lot of differences in here, but are they going to be major ones? We can see is that the alternator here was connected to this sump plate. The other one has a completely different sump that starts here, whereas this one's got a two-piece sump. It's got this piece here and then the sump pan in the bottom. My hope is that we'll take this off, we'll be able to get to the bolts at the bottom of here, which will then mean the other sump pan can go and replace this two-part pan here. The next thing we see is that this bracket is different. First of all, the other bracket doesn't have the tensioner on that bracket, or if it does, it's in a different spot. And I'm pretty sure it's down lower, comes up the other way. Is we've now got a very good look at the EGR valve, and the EGR valve number on there, the same as the EGR number on here. There's a lot of oil around the front here. There's a seal in the back of here. When you pull that clip out, there's a rubber O-ring that connects these two together. That rubber O-ring tends to perish over time. There's a lot of boost pressure on these things. So it's blowing boost out the bottom, and you can see up under there, look at that, it's very oily there. Is the oil down here, that oil residue, you imagine it's just pushing a little bit out over years, and then it's got dirty down here, it's got dirty down here. The seal behind here may be fine. I'm going to take this off and have a look, but I'm hoping the seal behind here is going to be fine, and the oil pump behind there is going to be the same as the other one. But if it's not, that's not a big deal, because I've got a brand new one on the other one, and I'll take that off and swap them over. There's the engine mounts. That's the right-hand engine mount off the Range Rover. Notice it's got 4 bolts, and this is the right-hand one off of the Jaguar, and you notice it's got 3 bolts. Look at the difference there. If those lined up, there's no way that they're interchangeable. So here we go, we've got a decent looking at the turbocharger. We can see the way that that's mounted. The other one has a different orientation with this around here, but I have a feeling it's only the housing that's different, and the housing may be able to be rotated, I don't know yet. Here are our two turbocharger inlet housings. The only difference between this one and this one is the final letter of the number. This is a 784001, 784002. They are exactly the same housing. The only difference is that they are rotated differently. The configuration is the same, the casting is the same, and even down to this. I thought this pin might have been in a different spot. We've got the pin there, just in that area there, on this one. Pin there, just in that area there. What's the difference between the two? Both turbochargers are the same turbocharger. They just have a different number because of the rotation of the front housing. We'll go and have a look at how they link in. There's the front of the housing here. As you can see, there's a tiny pin in that other housing. And on one variation, it goes into that slot there. And on the other variation, it goes into that slot there. So these turbos are the same. Now I'm going to pop a housing back on here to protect the turbine. I've had a look at this, and the turbine on this is really good, and there's very little play in there. You can have a look at that. There's a tiny bit, but very little. This is a genuine center, whereas the one I've got on the other one is an aftermarket one. I'm going to stick with this one, even though the other one is newer, because These turbos are known for chronic oil leak. When they start to fail, they get oil coming all in here. It fills up and it gets pushed down into the intercooler and then sucked up into the engine. As I'm going to sell this vehicle, I'm going to throw in the other one for a spare, and so if they want to maintain it further down the track. The other thing that's really important to know, this is the Jaguar, and you'll see where the dump pipe goes down and into the side of the block here. And if I come round to this one, it does the same. But that's only because I've modified it to do that. The original turbo on this one comes right down and dumped into the bottom of the sump. But it was a known fault. That because this was already immersed in oil, what would happen is you'd do a big squirt up the hill, and this would fill up with oil and push back up into here and then fire it out the front of the turbine. That's a modification that should be done on every single one of these engines. It should never be left the other way. Okay, so I've got that out. Now, to get that out, I had to loosen the EGR valve. It's okay because there's only 3 bolts. There's 1, 2, 3, and then that becomes loose enough, and I had to take those 2 out of there as well. The Jaguar does not have this at all. The vacuum unit, which bolts here, does not have an oil dump pipe on it at all. I'm not really sure how it works, don't really care, but this one does. So I'm putting the Range Rover vacuum pump on, and this needs to connect to it. Now this threads down in behind the turbocharger. I've done it little step by step, and now I'm telling you that you cannot get that in there without taking the crossover pipe off, without taking the studs out of the turbocharger, and also you've got to take the dump pipe off the turbocharger at the bottom. The only thing that's really hanging on by here is the oil pipe, and I've undone the bolts obviously at the bottom here. Then you've got to try and wiggle this and weave it until you can thread it through, and even then it wasn't particularly easy, but we got there in the end. An important thing about this is once you crack this joint on the turbocharger, whether it be this side or the other one, note you will have to get a gasket for this, and the reason is it never has a gasket to start with. That's it there. It just has 2 machined surfaces that flush fit against another. That's okay when it's brand new, but when it's done 200,000 kilometers, it's been heated and cooled, I guarantee you pop that open and it never seals up again. In fact, I did one on my Jaguar, and that's exactly what happened. It had a friggin' smelly exhaust. For months afterwards, I realized where the problem was, and it's a pain in the ass to get into. There is an aftermarket one that you can get. I think I got this from Gen 4 or something. That is the only one that I found aftermarket. When I did the last one, I couldn't find one. I found a gasket that was close, and I modified it. It worked. It was perfectly fine. If you can find a standard gasket that's in that configuration and cut her up and put it in there, that's fine. I've got to clean those surfaces. I'm going to put this new one in. That means that will seal again properly. But if you don't do that, I guarantee it will not seal properly. You will get exhaust gases coming out there, and you'll regret you didn't do it while you had the chance. Taking a lot of oil floating around in there. The only place it can come from is either in the V, which means that the oil filter generally hasn't been done up properly and it's not sealing and it's getting into the V and overflowing. But normally that would go down the back of the engine because that's the lowest point. This though is not coming from the V. Could come from here into here and then be spraying around. Could be doing that. But I'm picking that if I replace that seal, don't know about that one, but there's a lot of oil down in here, but that's coming from above. Coming from here, eh? Look at that, it's just pouring in there. So that's more up the top. I might have to replace the oil pump anyway. While we're talking about oil leaks, have a look down in here. There's a pool of oil down in the bottom under the flywheel. You can see up through here that it looks like there's oil up inside here as well. I'm not sure they can get to there, but there's a bit of oil in there as well. I'm going to take the flywheel off. I have got a spare rear seal. The problem is you've got to take the reluctor ring off to get the seal off. It's not just a seal, it's a whole housing at the back. Luckily I've got one. That reluctor ring is tricky to put on. You've got to get it in exactly the right place. There's no way I can do it while it's on the engine stand. I'll do everything else and I'll come back to that last. That is funky looking oil. One of the other things that has to be changed is this crossover for the water from the EGR valve. On this it goes down and around the back of the engine and across to the other side. Whereas this is, I'm putting on top here, that's the one off the Range Rover Sport engine. That's it there. That bolts onto the back of here, goes across the top of the engine. That's obviously got to be swapped over. I'm about to dive in there and change a whole pile of seals. I'm going to change the belt in the back, belt in the front, cam seals, crank seal. I've got it all off now. I'm never going to get another chance. It's going to be easier to do this. As the oil pump and the water pump were brand new on this engine over here, I'm going to swap them over onto this because this one's got 200,000 Ks. I might as well swap it out. I just wanted to show you the difference between the sumps. This is the one that came off the Jaguar, and this sump bolts on to the bottom of this sandwich plate here. Whereas the Range Rover Sport, which is this one here, is all just one piece. You can see it there. It's a lot deeper, goes down and behind the front axle. I've still got a protector plate like that to go into here, but I'm replacing the oil temperature / level sensor that goes in there because that was giving me a fault of open circuit or something like that. It just wasn't reading properly. In fact, I ended up overfilling it because of that. I'm going to put a new sensor in that's on its way, but for the moment I'm going to pop this back on the engine so I can get the bolt off the oil pump at the front. So this engine's been a little bit more of a challenge than I thought it was going to be, but nothing in a really bad way. I want a really good engine, so I just had to do the extra things. If you have a look here, in my hand, I found this in the bottom of the sump. From having built a couple of these engines, I knew straight away what that was. It was the chain tensioner between the cams disintegrating. If you have a look underneath here, that's the chain cutting into the bottom of it. Straight away I knew that I was going to have to take the tops off. And as I'd put brand new chains and tensioners on this engine here, I thought I'll just swap them over. So I've got to take the cams out, had to put new seals in, which I was hoping to do anyway. Down here is the old oil pump, and I've decided to change over the oil pump here and the water pump here. I'm going to take the ones off this engine. I've already got the oil pump off that, but there's the water pump, and I'm going to put them onto this engine here. This is a plastic branch that distributes the water from the cooling system between the two banks of the engine and also into the water-cooled oil cooler, which is underneath here. That's your oil filter there. And this branch comes back here and into the cooling system, into the radiator. The problem with these is they tend to crack. There's a little seam that runs here where they weld the two pieces of plastic together, but it doesn't generally crack there. It generally cracks on the bottom. The water comes out of that and then starts to fill up the V of the engine. And when you look down into the engine, you can't really see where it's going to until the thing is really bad. This tends to fail about every 5 years. They just get old, they get hot, they expand, they contract, and they crack. Today, I'm going to be replacing that with that. This is an alloy counterpart that I just bought online. This will get rid of that problem forever. And I'm doing a separate video as to the reasons why I've done that. Let's talk about the vacuum system. The vacuum system is basically the same, but I'll just go over the few changes that I've had to make. This I've taken off the old vacuum loom and put it onto here. Now there was a blanking piece on here. This goes to our airbox. Around here, the Jaguar had blanks on these two here. There's a red and a blue hose coming out here, but this is what's on the Range Rover because that feeds into the suspension system. You can see I actually broke it off the bottom. This mounts next to the ABS box that is mounted on the bodywork once we get it in there. At the front, all of this is the same, but I've blanked this off. Now there was on the Jaguar, there was another piece that came off there, went somewhere. On the Range Rover, that's just blanked off. Also underneath here, you can see I haven't put anything into there because that bit comes off the front radiator and it actually goes down to, let's find it, the control valve, which is mounted to the body at the front of the radiator. Let's talk about the back here. The back is all the same. You've got that vacuum hose running all the way across to that actuator there, both on the EGR valves. This all seems the same. I haven't checked part numbers, but I'm assuming that these are vacuum switches and they're all going to be the same. Once the vacuum switch is onto there, the only thing that is different on this is obviously we've had to change the vacuum pump over and that pipe, which we've talked about earlier. And then this connects in as per the Range Rover spec. This is different. This is on the Range Rover and this goes across to the bodywork and picks up on a hose on the body. This one is completely different to the Jaguar. Can't remember what was on there. but doesn't really matter. That's what's on there now. That will take care of our vacuum system. There it is, it's all back together again. Now, if I wasn't filming, and if I didn't start doing things like changing the cam chains, replacing the oil pump and all those things, I think probably just a simple swap over of the essentials that had to go from one to the other would take a day to a day and a half's work. So I think you could do that fairly quickly. Because I added all those additional things on, because I want to use all of the new parts that I already had on the old engine, because of that it's taken me a lot longer, some pretty solid days. But now it's ready to go, and I'll get on with getting it in the car. Well, there you have it. Like any engine replacement, they're a bit messy and they're pretty time consuming, but probably wasn't any worse than I expected it to be. Now, if you're doing a job like this, just remember one thing. Break it down into smaller components. Put all of your parts in one box for, say, your injectors, and another for your turbo, etc. And then when you come to put it together, it's going to be a lot easier. And take plenty of photographs. Take photographs and videos of everything you do, because you never know when you might have to reference them, especially if the time between when you start to pull it apart and when you put it back together, if there's a bit of a delay there. Just remember that. That's about it. Oh, you want to see it running? Okay. There you go, purrs like a kitten. Just remember one thing, you're far more capable than you think you are. See you on the next one.
Sorry, I was watching that.